video was brought to you by NordVPN. Africa, and in particular the Sahel region, has seen coup after coup in recent years. In fact, these coups have even been described as contagious, meaning that every coup seems to increase the likelihood of another country falling. Chad, one of the Sahel's few remaining Western allies, has been at a point of relative stability, sandwiched between war-torn Sudan in the east and Western Sahel countries struggling with escalating Islamist insurgencies. As one analyst put it, Chad's collapse would open a bridge that merges the flow of fighters, weapons, and violence between these two regions embroiled in conflict. So in this video, we'll explain why Chad, which already underwent a coup in 2021, is fertile ground for the region's next coup. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. First though, we're going to start with a quick bit of context. For more than 3 decades, from 1990 to 2021, Chad was led by Idris Deby. In what sounds like a story from another era, Deby was killed in 2021 in combat while visiting troops on the front line fighting against an armed rebellion. Constitutionally speaking, the president of Chad's National Assembly should have become interim president and held elections. However, a military junta led by the late president's son, Mahamat Deby, seized power and suspended the constitution. It was effectively a coup, but not one that was met with condemnation from other neighboring countries. France even defended the military takeover, calling it exceptional circumstances. And to be fair, since the younger Deby took over, Chad has continued to be a close partner of France, even while France has fallen out of favor after coups in its nearby ex-colonies like Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Anyway, the newly instated military junta had pledged to keep an 18-month transition period towards elections and civilian rule. But down to the line, this was delayed 2 years, and Mahamat Deby was sworn in as president and permitted to run in a future election. So why might Chad succumb to another coup? Well, the first reason we're going to look at is France's military presence, which leaves Deby in an increasingly difficult position. For context, France has a couple thousand troops stationed in Chad, including troops that were redeployed there after being withdrawn from Niger and other Western African countries that ordered them out. Now, these French forces are there to train the Chadian military, as well as use the country as a base to assist with and carry out anti-insurgency operations. Now, the late Idris Deby was a close ally of France, whose support played an important role in his regime's longevity, with France viewing him as a security partner and a bulwark against Islamist extremism, something that helped allay any concerns about democracy and repression. As for his son, France's quick endorsement helped him legitimize his unconstitutional takeover of power following his father's death. In fact, French President Emmanuel Macron even traveled to Chad for Idris Deby's funeral, where, sat next to the new president, he declared that France would not tolerate any threats to Chad's stability or integrity. While French support seems essential to the young Deby's survival, it could also end up being his downfall. Chad, like many francophone countries in the region, is seeing a rise in anti-French sentiment, sparking protests and calls from opposition figures for French troops to leave the country. As was set out in an SWP think tank policy briefing, resentment of the French military presence could make it easy for opposition forces or dissident fractions within the regime to mobilize against Deby. France's presence, then, is a sword of Damocles hanging over Deby's dynastic succession. But there are other political factors threatening Deby's position too. Part of the country's transition period is the adoption of a new constitution, which was proposed last year and voted on in a referendum in December. 86% of voters approved the new constitution on a turnout of 63%. The new constitution, championed by the government, will keep Chad as a unitary, non-federal state. But this has been a major point of contention among opponents. many of whom boycotted the referendum, saying that the transitional government had too tightly controlled the process. Opponents of the constitution have demanded a federal system, granting greater territorial autonomy than a unitary one, and said that the public should have been able to vote on their preferred mode of government before being asked to approve a new constitution. Now, at a glance, it appears that Deby is doing well at securing his position. The constitution he endorsed was approved. He'll be able to run in this year's election, and he's signed a reconciliation agreement with an opposition party, allowing for the return of its exiled leader, who has since joined Deby's government. Rather than pacifying the opposition, this may have just papered over the cracks. Several other opposition factions have distanced themselves from Masra, and are particularly angry about the part of the agreement which granted an amnesty covering those involved in October 2022's Black Thursday, which saw the police and military crack down on protests, killing hundreds. But perhaps more dangerous to Deby than any opposition-led revolt is the prospect of the country's Zaghawa elite turning against him. Since 1990, power in Chad has been concentrated in the hands of the military elite dominated by the Zaghawa, a non-Arab ethnic group from eastern Chad that makes up only a small proportion of the country's population. In fact, this military elite helped to install Mahamat Deby following the death of his father, who was Zaghawa himself. But their continued support is far from guaranteed, especially if Deby is no longer the best way to safeguard their power. And this is where neighboring Sudan come in. Sudan have been in crisis since April 2023, when civil war erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Now, officially, Chad is neutral in the conflict, but in reality it's far more complex. One of the RSF's key backers are the United Arab Emirates, who have allegedly been channeling military supplies to the RSF via Chad. This cooperation with the UAE in support for the RSF is thought to be financially beneficial to Chad, but it puts Deby on a collision course with his country's own Zaghawa elite, who are no fans of the RSF. Since the conflict broke out last year, the largely Arab RSF militia have been accused of carrying out brutal violence against non-Arab people in Sudan's Darfur region, including ethnic Zaghawas. It's no surprise then that Chad's Zaghawa elite reportedly want Deby's government to back the Zaghawa militias in Darfur that since November have been fighting against the RSF. And the dire humanitarian crisis caused by the Sudan war is also putting pressure on Chad. More than 500,000 refugees from Sudan have fled across the border, according to the UN's migration agency. As a country that already has one of the highest rates of hunger in the world, Chad is struggling to deal with this new refugee crisis, even with the help of international aid agencies. And to wrap things up, all of the factors we've discussed are contributing to the intensification of conditions which have often predicated other coups in the region. Rising anti-French sentiment, increasing insecurity and economic difficulty, intra-elite feuding, and outside pressures all point to Chad being the next country to succumb to a coup. Whatever the future may hold, it will always be important to keep yourself safe online. Fortunately, when it comes to your digital safety, NordVPN has your back. It's an unfortunate reality that online scams and phishing attacks are on the rise, with us constantly being bombarded by annoying notifications and emails that we forgot we ever signed up to. It's easy to click the wrong thing. And one seemingly innocent link can compromise security and bring things crashing down. With the protection of NordVPN though, you can use their threat protection feature to identify potentially suspicious links. And even if you've reached a suspicious website, NordVPN's data encryption tools will protect you and your data against a number of other attacks, such as malicious man-in-the-middle breaches. And even if you do get things wrong, NordVPN's dark web monitoring service is always scanning for your compromised details across the entire internet, and can even notify you before you even notice that anything's gone wrong. So if you want to securely connect to that free Wi-Fi at your local coffee shop without worrying that someone's trying to take a peek at your personal data, then you can sign up for a 2-year plan with a massive discount, plus an additional 4 months free at nordvpn.com/TLDR. Now, we've been told that sometimes our viewers just open up a new tab and type in the URL themselves. And while we're certainly glad that you're using the service, you only get that discount and support the channel by clicking that link. So if you wish to get the discount and support independent journalism further, then make sure you use our link. That's nordvpn.com/TLDR. Thanks for your support.